Hello, we got some new cards for the upcoming expansion. First up is High Priest Thecal. 3 mana, 3/4 legendary paladin minion with the battlecry convert all but one of your hero's health into armor. So the idea with this card is you can be at 30 health and it will bring you down to 1 health and give you 29 armor. The advantage to this is you're able to then heal and get yourself up to a higher health total. And so I think this is a pretty crucial card for some sort of control healing paladin Blizzard is going for. We've seen from their Spirit and Zandalar Templar that they're printing synergies to go with Paladin Heal. Instead of a warrior or druid that includes cards to give themselves armor, Paladin would play High Priest Thecal to gain a bunch of armor and then use their healing cards to gain more health. It's a really unique approach, and it's a great design for a control paladin. The biggest issue is, of course, drawing this card. It's only a one-off in your deck, and the lower health you are, the less value you're actually going to get from this. And I will say, this healing control paladin seems like a cool idea. And I like the theory of the deck, but I still don't think it has the cards to necessarily back it up. From the cards we've seen so far, I would gear paladin more towards a tempo deck that doesn't really need heal. It's really hard to evaluate this class because there are cards that could become a lot better, like Lesser Pearl Spellstone, and heal that we haven't seen used in a while with Lay on Hands. High Priestess Thecal is definitely for a control paladin, and I just don't know if there's a deck for that in paladin yet. Next up is Gurubashi hypeman. 7 mana 5/7 rogue minion with the battlecry, discover a 1/1 copy of a battlecry minion. It costs 1. This means you can get infinite Gurubashi hypeman. If you're looking for certain synergies, maybe you can use this with the new Rogue Spirit, but I think you have to look at this card's individual power level. 7 mana 5/7 isn't that great. You need this battlecry minion to make up that cost. And so what's kind of tough about this card is that there are so many different power levels of battlecries. There are battlecries that will get you tons of value, and then there are other ones that will deal 1 damage. And even though with Discover you're able to choose between 3 different minions, the value you need to counteract these poor stats needs to be pretty good. I think with this card you're not going to be able to consistently get a battlecry that's worth this poor stats. And you can combo this with the Rogue Spirit to get double the value, but you're not always going to be able to line up that play. I think this card could be right on the edge of playable, but I think at this price point it's just too inconsistent and won't see any play. Next up is Fire Tree Witch Doctor. 2 mana 2/2 neutral minion with the battlecry, if you're holding a dragon, discover a spell. So it's pretty interesting. They've already hinted at some dragon synergy, but they have actually yet to release a dragon. When it comes to any battlecry that requires holding a dragon, there's going to be those turns where you aren't going to be able to play the card. And that's just part of the drawback of these battlecries. But if a dragon deck does come into existence, then I think an early card like this would be a welcomed addition to some sort of tempo dragon deck. On turn 2, you get a 2/2 body out on the board, and you also discover a spell that will help shape your game plan. Gonna have to put this one in the middle of the pack because we still don't know what type of dragons they're gonna reveal for this expansion. But it looks like Warrior is trying to be the class to have that dragon deck. Warmaster Voone is a 4 mana 4/3 legendary minion for Warrior with the battlecry, copy all dragons in your hand. So if you have 3 dragons, now you have 2 copies of each for totaling 6. Adding more dragons to your hand will help make sure you can continue to satisfy the dragon required battlecries. There's also a lot of powerful one-off legendary dragons. You'll be able to get 2 Malagoses, 2 Yseras, and 2 Nosdormus. With that said, it's a very slow card. Warrior already has the structure for a control deck, so maybe they really don't need that much more in order to flush out a deck. Again, with this one, we need more information on the dragons to be printed, but I think this card specializes on such a controlling deck that it could end up being a little niche and maybe just a card you can opt into playing if you choose to take this in an even more controlling direction. And next up is Lickum, 2 mana 1/3 shaman weapon that has +2 attack while you have overloaded mana crystals. So this is basically like the new Spirit Claw, which if you don't know was originally a 1 mana 1/3 that would gain +2 attack when you gain spell damage. But then they nerfed the card to make it a 2 mana 1/3, and it wasn't nearly as good. Now the problem with that card is you would use your hero power, and sometimes games were decided by this weapon in a spell damage totem. It was definitely not a good system. Lickum, on the other hand, becomes a better weapon when you have overloaded mana crystals. You have a lot more control over overload cards, and how you build your deck and when you choose to play cards. Maybe it could see play in an even shaman. The one problem is that deck right now doesn't include any overload cards, but maybe that could change as more cards are revealed. I think this could be a decent weapon in an overload deck, but from the cards we know right now, it's nothing really that special. And next up we have Amani Warbear. 7 mana, 5/7 neutral beast with rush and taunt. You can use this in Build-A-Beast to maybe craft a nice lifesteal or poison rush minion, but I think its biggest use will be in a Death Rattle Big Hunter. Right now, in order of their best beasts, they run King Crush, Charge Devilsaur, Witchwood Grizzly, and Savannah Hypeman. I think there is a critical point for this Death Rattle Big Beast Hunter deck where you only want to have a certain number of big beasts. If you're just drawing big beasts every turn, then you're really not going to be able to tempo. And so I don't know what that critical number is, but I think depending on the meta, you may end up having to cut one of these beasts. It's really going to depend on what the deck and the meta demands. And while we're talking about big beasts, we have Revenge of the Wild, 2 mana hunter spell that summons your beasts that died this turn. This is a cheap card that you can apply in a bunch of different ways. In a tempo hunter deck, you can use Unleash the Hounds or get Huffer off of Animal Companion, trade those minions in to clear a taunt, and then resummon them again for only 2 mana. You could use Flark's Boomzooka to summon you 3 big beasts, and then after they trade and die, you can just resummon them and you'll have a pretty nice board still. And it's not like you have to trade your big beasts either, because you have cards like the Cube which will destroy your own friendly beasts for you. The reality of this card is that actually it's probably going to be a dead card for a lot of the game. Anytime your opponent kills your beasts on their turn, this card can't take advantage of that. So really, you have to sacrifice your own beasts in order for this to work. And as I said, that's either trading into enemy minions or cubing the minion yourself. And since Hunter doesn't have a lot of draw, how willing are they able to hold a card that they aren't going to be able to use most of the game? It's a tough card for sure because the value is so appealing. It might just be more of a card for a Hunter tempo deck. Up next, we have Masked Contender. 3 mana 2/4 neutral minion with the battle cry, if you control a secret, play a secret from your deck. In Hunter, maybe this could work in a tempo deck, but it doesn't work in Spell Hunter, so that kinda sucks. Rogue doesn't really have good secrets, and Paladin secrets are pretty cheap, so I think that leaves us with Mage. And I think the problem with Mage is that the Mage decks that use secrets don't really run that many. Tempo Mage only runs Counterspell and Explosive Runes, and if you play an Explosive Runes, this won't be able to play the other Explosive Runes from your deck. That means if you end up drawing your other secrets, then this won't get you any value. I don't think there's really the right deck that has enough secrets right now where this would be valuable. A few months ago, when a secret mage would play 3 or 4 different secrets, this could be a great option, but I think right now it's a pretty bad card. And last up, we have Walk the Plank, 4 mana rogue spell, destroy an undamaged minion. Rogue has their 5 mana spell that destroys a minion, and then they also have the spells that deal a good amount of damage for their mana to undamaged minions. It's a unique rogue requirement, and it gives this card a nice flavor. A lot of the time in the later turns, more controlling opponents are going to have that turn where they play 1 big minion. This can easily destroy those turn 8 Lich Kings. 4 mana is still expensive, but being able to remove a big enemy minion is well worth the cost. They already have a single target removal they run with Vilespine Slayer, but I could easily see them including this card as well. One thing to note though is it doesn't work in an odd rogue. So I think in order for this to see play in a tempo rogue, it really depends if a non-Baku rogue is good enough to see play. It's not going to enable a control rogue deck, but I think it's a nice spell that the class will be able to use until it rotates out. Alright, those are all of the revealed cards for today. I'll be back tomorrow with some more cards, but until then, ta-ta.